Welcome back, grade 11s. Now, let's look at our third concept, the meaning and project planning steps. The meaning of project planning. Project planning is a tool that can be used to turn an idea into an action plan. So basically, if we want to change that idea to become an action plan, we use project planning. It is a detailed description of all activities that need to be completed to execute a project successfully. So basically, a project planning, it is a description of all activities that need to be completed to execute a project successfully. So in a project planning, we describe exactly what activities do we need to do. And thereafter, after describing those activities, we need to make sure that we execute them successfully. So we would see the activities that has to be performed where in a project planning tool, because it's a tool that we use to make sure that we describe all the activities that have to be undertaken within a business in order to make sure that the project is successful. The startup of a business can be viewed as a project which must be planned. So obviously, when we have to start a business from scratch, we can take that as a project that we need to undertake as a business. And for that project, which is starting up a business, we need to plan it carefully in order for us to be able to execute all duties, all activities that has to be performed. Now, let's look at the project planning steps. We first need to define the scope of the plan to be done. What is it exactly that we need to do in order for the business to be started successfully? Remember, we are transforming a business plan rather, into an action plan. So we need to define the scope of the plan to be done. For example, define what is the purpose. What is the purpose of this particular project that we want to undertake, of which is starting up a business? We also have to, after defining the purpose, we need to know what the first activities will be. What is it that we are going to do first before starting a business? And then what activities will be the last activities that we are going to perform as a business? Then identify project supporters. Now we need to identify who will be the responsible people for the project that we want to start, of which is starting up a business. We know that we have different levels of management, so surely for the project to be run successfully, there has to be someone who is in control of everything that is happening in order for that project to be successful. So one member of the top management will be the one who will be overseeing things that are happening correctly, that activities are being executed as they have to be executed. So we need to identify those project supporters. Break project into activities. After doing that, after identifying the supporters, we need to make sure that we break the project into activities. We cannot do the project all at once. We have to break it into small, achievable steps that we are going to do step by step in order to reach the end goal, of which is starting a business. Then another step is set time frames and determine how much time you will need to allocate each activities. Another thing that we need to do, we need to set a time frame. Know that by this particular time, this particular activity has to be completed. In order for us to be able to allocate activities correctly, we need to set the time. Plot the activity schedule into a Gantt chart. So after planning everything, after identifying those supporters, after explaining the purpose of the project, and after setting those time frames, now we need to plot the activities on a Gantt chart so that we will see exactly what activities has to be done and in what manner should they be done. Those particular activities. Now let's move on to our last concept, which is planning tools. We'll start with timelines. A timeline is a representation of all the tasks that must be completed, and these tasks, and when rather, these tasks can be completed. So when we talk of a timeline, we are talking of a representation rather, whereby we represent all the tasks that we have to complete. And we must also know the duration, the time at which these particular activities has to be completed. That's why we say it's a timeline, because it has to do with the duration of tasks to be completed. Timelines help team members to know what milestones need to be achieved and by when. So through the timelines, because we can see which activities has to be done and by when should they be completed. So they assist team members for them to know exactly what activities has to be done and by when those activities has to be completed. They see those activities through a timeline, or on a timeline rather. Now let's look at the importance of timelines. They help project planners to project dates in advance. So timelines are very important because project planners are able to project dates in advance, that during this time or by this time, this is what should be completed. So they assist project planners to project those dates. Assist in determining the sequence or order in which activities or tasks must be completed. So timelines assist in order of sequence, that this is the first task and this first task should be completed during this time, and the second task should be started on this time and be completed also on this particular date. So they assist in terms of determining the sequence of activities. Keeps information in order that it has to be in. So timelines assist as it keeps information in the order that it has to be in. For instance, the first activities are performed, are given a first priority. They are prioritized and then followed by the second important activity up until the least important activity. So they assist in keeping the information in order, whereby even the supporters are not mixing the task, mixing the events or activities that they have to perform. They know very well that from activity 1, we move on to activity 2, which is doing whatever, and then we move on to activity 3. So information is kept in a good order. Then let's move on to work breakdown structure, WBS. A work breakdown structure is used to schedule the timelines for a project in order to decide what tasks need to happen, for instance, when and in what order. It is the first step in dividing the business plan into smaller projects. So the work breakdown structure, as the name says, work breakdown structure, it's the first activity that assists in dividing the activities, that this is the first activity that we need to perform in order to make sure that the project becomes a success, followed by this particular activity. So it's breaking down of activities in terms of importance. So making sure that they become smaller stages that are going to be achievable in order for the business to achieve that one final goal, of which is the bigger project. It can also be used to develop a Gantt chart. So we can use a work breakdown structure to develop a Gantt chart. It allocates responsibilities to staff members. So a work breakdown structure assists us in allocating activities to staff members so that they know that this particular staff member is going to perform this role and this other one is going to perform this particular role, so as to make sure that there is no confusion between staff members on the roles that they have to perform. Then we move on to a Gantt chart. It is a type of bar chart that visually illustrates the start and finish dates of elements or job tasks in a project. So as you can see there in our illustration there, so there's a start for a project as well as the end for the project. It illustrates the start and finish dates of a particular task that has to be done in a business. Then it shows what needs to be done by breaking a project into smaller parts. So as you can see again also in that illustration, it simply shows, look at the highlighted part, it's highlighted in yellow. So these are the activities that they have broken down, that this one is going to start on the 1st and end on the 7th, and then the other activity will continue in the second week on the 5th and 6th of the second week. So they've broken down the activities into smaller parts, but we know that at the end, obviously, a project will be completed if we maybe combine these smaller activities that has been broken down into smaller parts. Shows the duration of the task or element. So it shows the duration, it shows the time that this is week 1, this is week 2, week 3, week 4, and what must be done in those different weeks in terms of having the smaller activities that have been broken down. Then how do we construct a Gantt chart? Write all the activities that must be carried out in to complete a project. So we need to write all activities that must be performed to complete this particular project of starting a business. Decide how much time you will need for each activity. So when you draw up a Gantt chart, the first one is to write down the activities that must be carried out and also have a time frame. How much time are you going to need for each particular activity? Determine which activities need to be completed before another activity can be started and which activities can be carried out simultaneously. So when you draw a Gantt chart, you need to decide, you need to prioritize, make sure that, okay, the first activities are done at first, and then you also need to decide which activities can be done concurrently. Then you can plot those activities on a Gantt chart. The importance of a Gantt chart: events are shown in a chronological order. So events are shown from the first event up until the last event that has to be performed. The time needed for an activity is shown visually. So everybody can see by looking at a Gantt chart that how much time is allocated for each activity that has to be performed. Managers and team members can see which activities run concurrently. So managers and team members, they can see that which activities are being done at the same time. They see that on a Gantt chart. So it's very important. Team members can see who is responsible for each activity so that not all team members can do one and the same thing. So they can see through a Gantt chart that this particular person is responsible for this activity, and then this particular team member is also responsible for another activity. So I hope that today's lesson was fruitful and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.